Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had an enjoyable break and that you had an opportunity to engage with the exhibitors. We will now proceed with our first panel discussion of the day. The title of this panel is Heat Decarbonisation Policy and Supports from Government and Agencies. I'd like to begin by thanking all of our panellists for taking time out of their busy schedules to attend today. And the format of the panel discussion will be: first, I'll introduce each panellist. I will then have a chat with each of them in turn to do with areas of work and relevant to their particular department and organisation. And then we will take questions from yourselves if there are any questions from the floor for any of our panellists. So first, to introduce, I'd like to introduce Seán Flanagan. Seán is a forestry inspector with the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. He has a background in sustainable forest and nature management and has worked for 5 years in the forest sector development division with the focus on climate change policy. This includes national and EU policy development in relation to the land use change and forestry sector, adaptation, mitigation and wood energy, and he's also a member of the IrBEA steering group for the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme. So thanks, Seán, for joining us this morning. Next up is Seán Kinsella. Seán is the Principal Officer leading the Renewable Heat Delivery Division within the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications. The division has governance responsibilities for the support scheme for renewable heat, implementation of the National Biomethane Strategy and the development of the Renewable Heat Obligation Scheme. In addition, the division has also responsibility for funding and the development of the district heating projects in Ireland. Next up is Joseph Cummins. Joseph is a Principal Officer in the Department of Enterprise and Employment, with specific responsibility for the Climate Action and Economic Infrastructure Unit, with the Industrial Heat Decarbonisation Roadmap falling under his remit and that of the department. Next up is Paula Lynch. Paula joined SEAI in 2023 and is a Programme Manager at the SEAI with responsibility for the support scheme for renewable heat. Prior to joining SEAI, Paula worked as a Project Manager and Sustainability Consultant with Patrick McCall Environmental Consulting Engineering Limited, who specialised in mechanical, electrical and renewable technology consulting. Thanks, Paula, as well for joining us. And also our final speaker, our panellist, is Keith Whiriskey. Keith is a Senior Executive with Enterprise Ireland with specialist expertise in industrial decarbonisation, biomass, climate change, electricity markets and policy analysis. So thanks to all our panellists for joining us this morning. So begin with you, Seán. Could you just outline your own work of how the work of the department links with the broader biomass area? And there's a microphone there which you could use, and we'll pass the microphone on as we go.
Yeah, thanks, Seán. Is that working all right there? Yeah. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to IrBEA for giving me the opportunity to speak here today on behalf of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. I suppose DAFM Forestry, we're the responsible authority for policy development and promotion of forestry within Ireland. We're the voice of forestry at EU level, making sure that input into any policy development there related to biomass is represented from stakeholders within Ireland. And I suppose we have a lot of work areas that influence the wood biomass industry. That includes plant health, control of felling and forest research. Within my own work area, as Seán says, I'm working with the Forest Sector Development Division, and there I'm part of a broader team that's focused on the role of forestry in climate change mitigation. And we're very much looking at measures and actions in order to reduce the emissions from forestry within the land use change and forestry sector. We see biomass is having a really important role. We always have kind of a whole tree approach to forestry, and see that all assortments have a very important role to play. And I suppose biomass also has that kind of role in substitution of fossil fuel as well. So I suppose overall forestry and its products, and that includes biomass, really has an important role to play in reducing our, and helping us meet our greenhouse gas targets.
Thanks, Seán. And you have recently, or are currently implementing the government forest strategy. Can you outline some of the objectives of that strategy? Because I know there are links back into the wood fuel sector and the biomass sectors within the strategy.
Yeah, that's really a very important document that has been published in 2023, and that was after really extensive stakeholder engagement within the forest sector. So it's set out a vision for forestry in Ireland, and that is to urgently expand the forest cover in the country with an aim of reaching 18% forest cover. And that's through sustainable forest management. And I suppose just to put that in context, in the early 1900s we would have had less than 1% forest cover. We're now at 11.6% forest cover, so there has been a huge land use change over that kind of 100-year period, but there's more work to do in order to get us to that 18%. Forest strategy focuses on 5 key value areas. That's forest for climate, forest for wood, forest for people, forest for nature, and forest for the economy. And we have a forest strategy implementation plan then that has 87 actions set out across these value areas, and many of those actions are focused or have kind of elements of promoting wood biomass within that. Probably just to add to that, then we have our forestry program launched, which covers the 5-year period from 2023 to 27, and that's the largest investment in the history of the state into forestry. It's 1.3 billion, and that has provided a range of schemes that focus on the expansion of forestry, protection of our current resource, and also schemes like roading in order to mobilise that biomass resource.
In the biomass sector, we're always at pains to point out about the link between biomass and forestry, and particularly around sustainable forest management and the use of thinning material where the biomass resource comes from, and the contribution that the biomass sector makes to the overall objective of increasing the volume of timber in construction. Can you just maybe give us a bit of a perspective around that whole sustainable forest management piece and the role of biomass in that objective?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of sustainable forest management, all of our procedures, whether that be planting of trees and the felling of trees, and even the biomass industry itself, it's based on these principles of sustainable forest management, and that means that all our procedures take into consideration the protection of and enhancement of biodiversity, water quality, soil quality, and protecting habitats. So I suppose biomass and forestry are really intrinsic to each other. You can't have one without the other. Our forest owners need to be able to market all parts of the tree. Every assortment is important, from sawlog to the harvesting residues. I suppose in an ideal world, you're harvesting that tree and you want as much of it as possible to go into those long-lived products that can be used in construction, and it locks up carbon for that long period of time. But in reality, there's elements of the tree and products there that are unsuitable for those long-lived products, so we need a market for them, and that's where wood biomass plays a crucial role. And it allows, I suppose, the forest owner then to maximise that resource and realise the full potential within that. In terms of things like thinning would be another area where wood biomass has an important role. So you're going in there, you're creating space for your bigger and better trees, you're removing the trees that are lesser quality, and again, wood biomass is the market there that can help in order to ensure there's income there for forest owners, so they can perform sustainable forest management. And I suppose a really good example of the circular economy and the role of wood biomass can be seen in our sawmilling industry, where you have logs coming into the mills, they're being processed. There's a lot of sawmill residue over, there can be up to 50% of it can be sawdust, and then that is utilised in order to power the kilns, to dry those timbers that can go into the long-lived products, and I suppose it's having a knock-on effect then that you're decarbonising both that business industry, but also ensuring that those products are substituting fossil fuel-based materials like cement and steel.
Okay, thanks very much, Seán. So while you're on the biomass generation side, Seán, you're on the energy side of the whole area. So could you again outline your own responsibility, Seán, in your role in the department, and what you do?
Yeah. Thanks, Seán, and thanks for the invite today. Yeah, I work for the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communication. I work in the Heat and Built Environment Division. Within this division, we have a number of projects or programs running to support the decarbonisation of heat, including in industry. Particularly important program is the support scheme for renewable heat, and supports the move away from fossil fuels to biomass boilers. So I have responsibility for the governance of that programme. Work closely with the SEAI, with Paula, who operates the programme, and we'd also work very closely with Joe, who ultimately have policy ownership of that programme. In addition to the support scheme for renewable heat, I have responsibility for the implementation of the National Biomethane Strategy, which was published last year, and the development of the Renewable Heat Obligation Scheme.
And we'll come back and maybe have a quick brief chat about the biomethane strategy, even though our focus today is biomass, because there are some people here interested in the biomethane side, but specifically on the support scheme for renewable heat. I know the then Minister back in 2023, Eamon Ryan TD, announced that he was planning an extension of the SRH biomass operational support to the ETS sector. Many attendees today are interested obviously in this development. Could you provide us with an update on where that's at and the steps that are involved in getting the ETS sector involved in this support scheme?
Yeah, the support scheme for renewable heat has been running since 2019 and provides operational support on a multi-annual basis up to 15 years. And it really provides that bridging funding between switching from a fossil fuel boiler to a biomass boiler. Throughout the last 5-6 years, we've continuously tried to update the scheme and improve the uptake of the scheme. And one of the key recommendations, and what was ultimately approved by the Minister, was then to open up the scheme to the EU ETS sector as well. And what that'll do then is obviously open it up to larger energy users, improve our renewable heat targets, but also crucially it'll be an anchor load, so it'll underpin the availability of biomass for smaller industry players as well. So it'll be the whole package, so then it will include the EU ETS sector, but also support the non-EU ETS sector as well. Where we are in relation to implementing that element of it, we ran into some issues last year. There were some changes to the state aid, EU state aid guidelines that required that any support for above 1 megawatt hour would have to go into a competitive process, so an auction, and then into contracts for difference. This was mainly focused on the electricity sector. Is not as suitable for the heat sector. You don't see it throughout Europe hardly ever being used in the heating sector. It's not appropriate for. We don't feel it's appropriate for Ireland either. So we've had engagements with the European Commission on this, and effectively we're looking for an exemption from that. So we'll stay. We'll be able to provide that support.
As operational support.
Operational support, yeah. Tariffs on it due to administration rather than competitive process. So where are we now at the moment? So we've had those discussions with the Commission in relation to an exemption from that. The next step is a public consultation. The consultation is finalised. We were hoping to have it ready for this event, but you'll see that imminently, probably in the next week or two. It'll be a short consultation. It'll ask some questions in relation to the issue I just described, get your opinion on expanding it into the EU ETS sector, particularly in relation to the amount of bidders that might come into an auction process. Will it benefit certain cohort of industry that would be able to take on such an endeavour? So they're the type of questions, and then we have another couple of questions just about the support scheme for renewable heat in general. But as I said, you should see that consultation.
So the consultation will take place in the next couple of weeks. Yeah. What's the timeline from there, or the steps required from there then for?
So we've been engaging with the European Commission. After the consultation, we'll go for a formal notification. minimum 6 months, but we've been engaging with the Commission before now, so we're hoping that they'll make a decision before the end of those 6 months. So, but that their timelines you have to keep into consideration.
I know from talking to many of our members that operational support is a very, very important aspect of the scheme, and we would certainly encourage a lot of people to respond to the consultation and to articulate that and maybe outline how the contract for difference system might work on the electricity side, but on the heat side it's a completely different ball game. So we certainly be encouraging our members to participate in that consultation.
Absolutely.
So thanks very much for the update on that, Seán. If I could just briefly maybe talk to you about the biomethane strategy, and I know specifically we're here to talk about biomass today, but I couldn't let the opportunity go without maybe giving you the opportunity maybe to give us an update on where things are at regarding the strategy itself in terms of its implementation. We know the government are focused on a capital support and an obligation scheme as the mechanism for development of the sector. So would you be able to give us an update on where things are at in terms of strategy and maybe the renewable heat obligation as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Very similar to biomass, there's enormous potential for biomethane in Ireland. You know, whether it's waste from agriculture sector or food, whether it's from diversification in the agricultural sector. Use to date, you see biomethane going into transport, but in the future it'll likely go into high heat processes, maybe some backup electricity. The importance, again, very similar to biomass, you know, the decarbonisation of our energy supply, also decarbonisation of our agricultural sector. Biomethane would be particularly important, but also from a security of supply perspective, and this has really come into focus in the last number of years. The strategy itself was published last May, and so we're going into implementation phase at the moment. There's 25 key actions to be implemented by the department, state agencies, some stakeholders, semi-state companies. So we're in the middle of that at the moment. A couple of actions that would be particularly important this year are the Sustainability Charter to ensure that the sector develops in a sustainable manner. A communication strategy that we're engaging with the local communities where the anaerobic digesters are likely to be situated, and crucially also in relation to planning guidelines. So we'll be working on that this year. But focus to date has been on the support schemes. As you mentioned, there's going to be 2 rounds of capital grant support and the RHO. The Department of Agriculture ran the first capital grant support scheme last year. My department, Department of the Environment, Climate and Communication, will run the second grant scheme, and that will be a much larger scheme running from 2026 to 2030. And we're just working on the funding of that at the moment and designing that scheme, and that should be in place then by 2026. Crucially, the RHO. So what is the RHO? The RHO is an obligation scheme that a certain percentage of fuel will have to be in the mix by fuel suppliers going into the heating sector. And that'll be tasked then with doing 2 things, obviously increasing the amount of renewables in our heating sector, but it's also been tasked with driving demand for domestically produced biomethane. The underlying work on the RHO, I know it's taken a while, but the underlying work has been completed now. We've started drafting the legislation for it, but there's effectively one outstanding item, and that's a mechanism to ensure that it does what the second task is, and that's to encourage domestic production of biomethane. And we've been engaging with the European Commission on this. We want to ensure that there's no issues with the internal market and that there's no issues with trade. So the European Commission has asked us to make a formal notification on that one as well. To do that, you need primary legislation. So we're developing the primary legislation at the moment. But and
that wasn't envisaged, maybe, that you would have to do that process?
No. So obviously, the RHO would always have to be underpinned by legislation. So that work is parallel. That would have to be done anyway. But the issue in relation to engaging with the Commission was not foreseen.
And that's going to push the timeline out slightly?
Yeah, the notification is a minimum of 3 months. And if the European Commission then give a formal opinion, it's automatically an additional 3 months. So we're factoring in that at the moment. We were hoping to have the scheme started on the 1st of January 2026. Obviously, this has now knocked it back. I can't put an exact date on it, but that's where we are at the moment. But I just emphasise the underlying work has been completed, and we're working on the heads of bill at the moment.
I think the most important point here is just that the industry would be given some form of guidance and steer as to what's going on at the moment. There's a bit of would see a bit of a gap there at the moment around information, so it would be important that the Minister maybe make a statement on this. We would encourage that to take place, to give a bit of certainty to the people that are out there planning projects that this is coming, but it's going to take us a bit longer.
Absolutely, I 100% agree, and you'll see that probably in the next couple of weeks as well.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Seán. We might come back on a couple of other items. I now go to Joseph, and Joseph, your work, and we've met a number of times about the decarbonisation of industrial heat and the roadmap. So do you want to outline your own role first of all, Joseph, in the department, and maybe then we talk about the roadmap itself?
Sure. So, good morning, afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I can't see anything, so you can assume I'm looking at you. So my name is Joe Cummins. I'm the Principal Officer in the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, soon to be the Department of Enterprise, Tourism and Employment. And I'm here on behalf of Minister Burke, who couldn't make it today. DESI's role is really about the capacity of the economy to produce high quality employment, to produce economic return, and to make sure that there's a high standard of living for citizens of the state. That's the broad objective. My role as a principal officer is in the climate action and energy policy space, and I'm tasked with decarbonising our industrial sectors and our commercial building sectors. So all my work is focused on the commercial opportunity that decarbonisation presents for our industrial manufacturing sectors, ensuring that we're removing any barriers, stones in the shoes, processes that don't work that act as a barrier or a drag on companies decarbonising their process. Why? Because it is essential to Ireland's national competitiveness. The Draghi report points to a competitiveness gap in the EU, and Ireland similarly has a competitiveness gap within the EU. And we think putting decarbonisation and energy resilience at the centre of our enterprise strategy enables us to have resilient, sustainable businesses that will employ people and produce prosperity out into the medium term. So that's the focus of my work. DESI is responsible for the sectoral emission ceilings in industry and buildings. Obviously, energy policy sits with DEC, but it's increasingly central to how we go with our enterprise policy as well.
And the industrial decarbonisation is within your space, so could you just outline to us what the roadmap contains, and what it suggests, and the role of the different fuelling options?
So last year we produced the roadmap for decarbonising industrial heat. It's a really simple document. It's about 10 or 12 pages. It designs a trajectory to our 2030 target, which is a 35% reduction in emissions from our manufacturing sectors. And it sets out the technologies that will get us there. Those technologies essentially are a lot of electrification, significant role for biomass, significant role for biomethane, and measures that would drive efficiency through the design of industrial processes and in the operation of industrial processes. So to talk specifically to the biomass and biomethane elements, they are crucial to decarbonising particularly high temperature heat needs in industrial settings. They provide a bit of resilience as well. They diversify us from our electricity and gas international supply chains and provide resilience to our manufacturing sectors and create opportunities, particularly in our agri-food sector, to have a circular economy element to sectors in this country, whereby if manufacturers engage with their supply chains, with their farm-level suppliers, and with indigenous biomass producers, we're building resilience and a sustainable energy ecosystem in the country, which obviously has good energy policy benefits, but obviously good economic policy benefits too.
And specifically on the biomass, when you were developing the roadmap, did you identify any particular opportunities or any particular challenges that you see around the deployment of biomass at industrial scale?
So the challenges we saw in biomass are really highly related to perception of the fuel as difficult to use, difficult to store, difficult to transport. Having said that, we do know that some very large manufacturers are successfully using biomass in the country every single day. So while there's a perception risk, I think there's a lot of work we can do and IrBEA can do to dispel some of the myths around this as a fuel. The sustainability certification that was discussed earlier brings a level of confidence to our large manufacturing base as well. This is sustainable, it complies with the Renewable Energy Directive, it helps them meet their corporate and CSRD decarbonisation objectives.
And I guess what you were saying there about the perceptions was the very reason why we're actually having this event, is to address the resource availability, to address sustainability, environmental considerations, to talk about the policy and support aspects, but also showcase existing users and indeed talk about other areas as well. So it covers a lot of the items that you talk about.
The other key part of the roadmap is to set out the regulatory and policy tools we will use to drive. So CSRD is a key one on the reporting side. There's the Renewable Energy Directive, but then there's also the state support. I won't steal the thunder of the agencies, but the Minister for Enterprise has put €300 million on the table to support industry to decarbonise. SEAI similarly has some very useful actionable support that can reduce your emissions in a relatively short time frame with a bit of attention and focus. So the money is there, and I'd encourage those of you who are thinking about it, go and talk to SEAI or Enterprise Ireland or IDA because there's people on hand who know this stuff and can help you through the process.
Okay, thanks very much, Joseph, and we will turn to Paula now, who is on that side of it from the support. Like Seán talked about the governance side from the department, and you're working on a day-to-day basis in terms of the rollout of the SSRH programme. So maybe could you just give us an outline of what you do, Paula, and your particular role regarding the programme?
Yes, of course. So I'm the programme manager on the support scheme for renewable heat, and I'm sure everybody in the room knows what that is by now, but it's an operational aid tariff that we pay out for businesses moving from fossil fuels onto biomass boilers. So we pay out over 15 years quarterly based on heat meter readings that are submitted to us. So my role day to day is just overseeing the programme administration. So there's a lot of engagement with stakeholders around promotion of the scheme. There's also managing public perceptions of the biomass that we've spoken about, like trying to educate people. So we take part in a lot of events. We work with the public sector, private sector. We partnership with our large industry energy network and the internal teams, as well as trying to attend a lot of the events. But I suppose the main part of the work comes from the administration, the day-to-day. You can imagine there's, once someone successfully completes a project, we're in a 15-year contract with them, so there's a lot of moving parts. We have to administer, heat meter readings are submitted, they have to be verified, applicants have to be paid, checks are made on payments and things like that, so there's a lot of moving parts. But we have a good team, and we've done significant progress in the last year to bring the scheme up to date and to get people moving on to that payment scheme. So as well as working on the day-to-day, then we feed in with DEC on the policy inputs, expanding the scheme to the ETS, significant work being done on that. And just promoting the scheme and monitoring and targeting the outputs from that.
Okay. And I suppose I'd like to just publicly acknowledge your own work, Paula, because we've certainly seen a huge progress in the support scheme over the last year and a half under your own stewardship. So I'd like to acknowledge your work in that regard, because it's great to see that the scheme is progressing and moving forward. Could you give us just a brief update on maybe the numbers, how many projects are on the cycle, what type of projects they are, and maybe have you any asks of the people in the room here in terms of future projects applying?
Definitely. Well, thank you first of all for that. It's definitely a team effort. It's not just me. There's people you don't see that work on this day to day that have put in a lot of effort. But so we started last year with 34 on the payment cycle. Today now there's 66 sites that are on the payment cycle receiving payments. Of those 66 now, over half of them are agriculture, so pig farms, mushroom growing, poultry farms. The next sector would be the hotel hospitality, and then nursing homes, and then I think education is the next one after that. So to date now we've paid out €3.8 million in tariff payments for those 66 sites. and it's delivered heat from meter readings. The delivered heat is 113 gigawatt hours. So as past the 66 sites, then there's 30 other additional live letters of offer out there with people. Unfortunately, not all of them follow through with the letters of offer, so they won't all come through onto the payment cycle. But I am confident that we will hit 80 by the end of the year at least. I mean, it would be great to hit more than that. At the moment, on the application side, it is quite slow. So yeah, we would ask if anyone has any interest, please do bring them to us. We're happy to meet with people, to have meetings with them, explain the benefits, help educate, promote in any way we can. But yeah, so say the commitment that's there at the moment from those 66 that are on the payment cycle, it's a 26 million euro commitment to those 66 companies, so it'll be paid out over the next 15 years. It equates to about 1.7 million annually. If everybody was to come through, the 96 that are out there, it would be a 39 million euro commitment, which is quite significant. Brilliant.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Paula. Just to conclude on your contribution for now, Seán has given us an update in terms of the move to get the ETS sector involved. So have you any comment or feedback on this, and what do you see as the opportunity here? Like a lot of the projects you've talked about will be in the commercial space rather than the industrial space. So how do you see the role here for the industrial space, given that's the audience we have today?
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I would love to see it opened up to the ETS sector. We've had some interest, and it's disheartening having to turn people away at this stage. When we think about the 113 gigawatt hours that we've delivered, that's from like 66 small SME kind of sites. The impact of having someone from the ETS sector, having them come on board, the delivered heat then is going to, like, our targets are going to be more easily met than sticking with the SME side, which are brilliant. We still want to retain all of that, obviously. But even the economic benefits, like not just to the industrial, but to the smaller companies and after that, I mean, it's a win-win situation, definitely.
Okay, and then if I could move over to Keith, because Keith is from the Enterprise Ireland side, while you're on the operational support side. Keith's probably more towards capital support and that. So Keith, would you just give us an outline, first of all, of your own areas of responsibility, and particularly around the industrial decarbonisation piece?
Super. Hello all, my name is Keith Whiriskey. I'm from Enterprise Ireland. I can't say that Joe maybe stole my thunder, but he was definitely very comprehensive in his input. So I'll give you a quick overview of what Enterprise Ireland does. It's in the name. We help Irish companies grow, professionalise and compete and export globally. But sustainability is a core factor of that as well. So Enterprise Ireland also engages our client companies to make sure that they're fit for the future and their emissions can be as low as they can be. Joe also mentioned the sectoral ceiling targets. That means Irish enterprise has to reduce their emissions by 35%. There's about 7.5 million tonnes of industrial emissions in Ireland, so that's more than all residential emissions and only a little bit less than electricity emissions. So this is a huge task, and we need all the agencies along with the IDA and SEAI working together to make that an achievable target. And as Joe mentioned, we have 300 million euros in capital funding between ourselves and IDA to deliver capital investments to renovate factories, make them efficient, put new technologies in, and that is agnostic to technology. We will do heat pumps, we will do biomass, we will do biogas. All of these different things can happen to make sure that factories can get to their decarbonisation. Yeah. So in short, my job is to aid Irish factories to renew and reinvent themselves to reduce their emissions in line with the sectoral targets.
And specifically, like you mentioned the number of different technology options, but what's the feedback from your clients on biomass? And is there an interest in biomass from a decarbonisation perspective?
So over the past 2 years or so, we've probably about 50 million in capital to work, and that's led to more than 100,000 tonnes in CO2 emissions reduction. That's primarily been on electrification and efficiency to date, but we are having more and more conversations about biomass because electrification can't solve all our problems. We need a diversity in solutions, and we're seeing a growing pipeline of large biomass projects, and they're becoming an integral part of the decarbonisation strategy of large industrial facilities, especially where we have things like CHPs on site. You need a high temperature heat and that big load of power. So we would see biomass as integral to making sure that 35% target is achievable.
Okay, and can you just outline to us, do you provide technical support to your clients and how does that work?
So we have a range of supports, and we work very closely with our clients. We would have long-term engagement with them. So we would have things called strategic consultancy, where we can help companies build a fundable investment plan, basically, so how their plant and their facility is going to get to the 2030 targets. And as I mentioned, that will include a range of technologies. So we can help develop that plan, and then subsequently we can provide capital supports to deliver that plan. And that can be provided by ourselves or in tandem with different supports from SEAI. Unfortunately for us as well, we don't have the same limit when it comes to the ETS limit. So we can fund ETS clients through a capital lens to put biomass boilers in today.
Okay. And do you see any role for the likes of IrBEA and the industry to help and assist both you and clients in terms of this transition and getting more of these systems in place? Or?
So this is where I'll agree with Joe. It's about perceptions and it's building knowledge as well. We're starting to see that change, and I think events like this help. That biomass is back on the table. Perhaps for a while people had maybe put it down their priority list. They thought it was something that they wanted to avoid, but now you can see that it's a cost-effective way to get very large emissions reductions without having to do heart surgery on your plant that you would have to with other technologies. And we're also seeing the price of electricity and grid connections perhaps restraining electrification a bit as well, which means the lifting done by biomass will be higher. And that's why we need to change the perceptions, make sure people understand that the biomass is available, that it's cost effective, that it's easy to operate, that there's expertise out there in Ireland. And ultimately, seeing is believing. If we have some new facilities installed recently, that will encourage others to follow. So it's to build that confidence really in the sector.
Okay, thanks very much, Keith. Is Noel there? And is there any questions for any of our panellists? There's a question at the back. Yeah. Just state your name and organisation if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no problem. Seán, Stephen Robb with the Farmers Journal. I know this is focused on biomass, but I cannot not ask the question to Seán on the RHO. Can you elaborate what actually were the issues in the Commission as regards the RHO? And to follow up, we keep hearing about this multiplier for indigenous biomethane. Can you give us some details? What is it? Is it 2 times, 3 times versus another fuel source?
First of all, your first question, RHO, and it's linked to your second question. So when we were developing the RHO, now the RHO isn't just biomethane, the RHO will be across all fuel types, and all renewable fuels that fulfill the sustainability criteria will be able to take part in it. But it was given the task of encouraging the development of the domestic biomethane sector as well. So when we were developing the RHO and we looked at where biomethane was likely to come from, the biomethane from the EU was probably quite limited, and there's limited amount of trade there at the moment. However, it is much cheaper than it is in Ireland currently, and it's likely to be over the next couple of years. So we were, based on that, biomethane from the continent was likely to come into Ireland and would undermine our endeavours in relation to developing a domestic biomethane sector. So we had to build in some sort of mechanism into the RHO to ensure that domestic biomethane would at least get a level playing field. So that's where the multiplier comes in. Multipliers are common across these type of schemes, but they're often focused specifically on the fuel type rather than a fuel type that's indigenous. And that's where the issue with the European Commission came in. They'd like some more information in relation to how it will not interfere with the European single market. So it's a cross-border trade issue. So we think we have very good justification for that, and we have to go through the process of a notification in relation to it. So that's what it is. The mechanism is a multiplier. I won't give you the value of the multiplier at the moment, but we're not looking to put a multiplier on that is going to give domestic biomethane an advantage over European biomethane. We're only looking for a level playing field, and this will be required to justify it to the European Commission then as well, that it's not interfering with cross-border trade.
And just a quick follow-up, so January 1st, 2026 is not the date anymore for the implementation of the RHO?
No. So a lot of the work we still have to do in developing the legislation and getting the scheme administrator up and running would have had to be done anyway. So that's not going to be impacted by this. The impact is that the notification has to be done through the what's called the TRIS system. The Commission has 3 months to reply to that, and if they give a formal reply, it's an additional 3 months. That does not necessarily mean that you're adding 3 months on to the 1st of January 2026. We're trying to do a lot of stuff in parallel. But it is obviously after knocking that 1st of January 2026 date out. Can't give you a new date, unfortunately. But the aim is to get this implemented as soon as possible.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Seán. Next question, Noel. There's a question here from the front. Yeah.
Timmy Carey, Biomarine, we're a small biopharmaceutical plant. Thank you to the speakers, it's a fascinating conversation. I'm just wondering, with the projections with electricity prices becoming higher and higher and being a crucial element of competitiveness for Irish industry, particularly with projections for energy costs in the US and Europe and that in the future, have the government departments done their projections as against the competitiveness argument about biomass and where that sits overall, because that potentially is a game changer for a lot of industry?
So Joseph or
Thank you.
Keith, maybe, do you want to take it, Joseph?
I'll have a first go at that. So the Department of Enterprise is clearly focused on competitiveness and on the competitiveness challenge that you raise. We take a technology neutral approach, right? The state is not going to tell a specific manufacturer what fuel they should be using in their manufacturing process. That would not be a sensible thing for the state to do. But obviously we're driving companies to invest in the thing that is going to be most sustainable over time and most competitive over time. There's a lot the state can do to help. So we provide consultancy, etc., as advised. We also need to sort of take a national look, and Minister O'Brien recently announced an energy affordability action plan working group that will look specifically at energy costs nationally and the challenge that poses for our industrial base. So this is at the top of the policy list in terms of the government's priorities, but it will be a technology neutral approach when it comes to industry, and we will aim to provide the level of support that allows you as a business to invest in the thing that makes you most competitive over time. That's the approach that we'll be looking to take. Speaking personally, biomass has many advantages, right? It's an indigenous supply. It's not reliant on long global supply chains. You can build up a relationship with an indigenous producer, supplier, or company in the market. And that provides resilience to your business. And as I said, in the agri-food sector, it can provide a level of circularity or supply chain integration that can provide real benefits, sustainability benefits, product benefits, and commercial benefits to the business. So I think there's a real opportunity there. And as Keith said, maybe overcoming some of the perception barriers to the use of biomass as a fuel is a good first step so that everyone understands that potential and then can make their own commercial decisions on that basis.
Keith, do you want to comment on this, or has Joseph covered it? Okay, I hope the question. Any further questions, final questions? Okay, there's another hand there, yeah. Take one more question after this and we'll have to wrap up, unfortunately.
Hi, Philip Doyle, Reserve Energy. I was wondering, maybe I'm harking back to the earlier session, whether the RED III directive might reduce the role of biomass or, because of the sustainability requirements, increase its cost. I was interested in the panel's thoughts on that.
So who wants to take that? Does the RED III directive increasing sustainability requirements, will it result in increased in cost, which potentially will impact on the use of biomass? That's in summary your question. So I don't know.
I don't know the technical details of the RED III requirements as opposed to what we're currently operating with, but my understanding is that the Irish supply chain has strong sustainability credentials and should be able to meet those new requirements. What it means in terms of cost, I'm not going to comment on because I'm not qualified to. The benefit of RED III, though, is that it creates a standard across Europe, creates competition between providers, and creates a level playing field for fuel across the continent. That should, if competitive pressures work, produce a competitive market for this product and allow the cheapest and the most commercial products to maintain and provide that solution to the customer. I can't comment specifically on the price impact.
Seán, do you want to come in on that? No? Okay, just in terms of that, what I would say is that, well, first of all, we're still under the RED 2, in that RED 3 hasn't been transposed yet. But what I would say, and Noel will cover it in his presentation later, and I'll come back to Eugene in a second, that biomass, when you compare electrification, biomethane and biomass is by far the cheapest of those from the point of view of, from the decarbonisation perspective. And it would have a long way to go in order to be probably uncompetitive with some of those, even adding additional costs associated with the implementation of the Renewable Energy Directive 3. But perhaps Eugene, do you want to comment? Was it a question or was it a comment on this?
I was going to say pretty much what you were saying, but I think the other point is scale is very important in terms of costs. You know, we need to scale up. That's really a massive task for us to do. If you scale up, your prices will come down and get more competition. So I think that's really important.
Okay. Any final questions? I'm happy to take one final question if there is one before we... okay, I don't see any other hands. If I'm missing anyone, just raise your hands high. Okay, I'll give each of our panellists literally 30 seconds to just give a concluding remark. If you have a particular concluding remark, and we start in the opposite direction. So we'll go, Keith, if you have just any final concluding remarks just from this panel and from the topic.
I wanted to give a piece that's maybe a bit wider than biomass and down to decarbonisation in general. So the mood music maybe globally when it comes to trade and certain things happening over the Atlantic means that maybe people want to put climate action maybe down the agenda a little bit. And I just wanted to say that I've worked in the climate change space for about 20 years. So I've gone through one recession, one COVID and 2 Trumps. So it's been a lot. But climate change has never gone away. It's always been there. It's always just been in the background and it just buzzes away. And sometimes people lose sight of it, but then it comes back and it comes back worse, basically. It's like having bad tinnitus that just slowly builds. So it's important that we're actually actively working to decarbonise and we're not losing sight of the investments and we're constantly progressing so that we're getting on the way to our targets, because ultimately the climate change conversation is always going to be there, and if we don't do anything, it will just slowly get worse and it'll take over all of our conversations.
If I could ask just before we go to Paula, just for Michal to maybe come forward and just be gearing up towards getting ready for the presentation. Paula, just a final concluding remark from you.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, I mean, we heard William say earlier, SEAI do see biomass as a key component in the future for Ireland decarbonisation, and we do have supports available at the moment for capital grants for biomass under the Exceed programme and under the Communities grant. And then we are still delivering SSRH, like it's still open for applications, and hopefully my work can expand to the ETS sector and get that side moving as well.
Joseph.
I won't repeat Keith's comments, which I think are very well made. What I would say is, in a period of trade uncertainty, sometimes people think it's better to do nothing than to do something. I would challenge you that that is not the case. The real frontier companies are investing now in the market that will arise in 5-10 years' time. Don't miss the opportunity to move with that frontier sector, because they'll be your competitors when trade flows open up again, or when we're back in a cycle of expansion.
Seán.
Yeah, just like I recognise that when we talk about decarbonisation, the focus is often heavily on electrification, but I can just reassure that within the department it's recognised that we're not going to reach our targets focusing on electrification alone. All fuels will be needed, and a tech-neutral approach will be needed, including bioenergy, whether it's biomass, biomethane, etc. And that's the approach we're taking, and you should see that reflected in the programmes we're running and the support we're providing.
And Seán, you have the concluding remark for this panel, so I'll leave it to you.
Thanks very much. I suppose concluding remark would be that I suppose our sustainable forestry management and the sustainable use of wood biomass can help us meet our climate targets. We've over 800,000 hectares of forestry across the country. It's in every corner of the country, and utilising the wood biomass resource can really help to decarbonise rural businesses and help support the rural economy. We need to promote biomass use in the general public, and IrBEA are doing great work in that area. And I suppose finally, just to reiterate that this is an indigenous renewable energy resource, and by utilising the whole tree, we're decarbonising and reducing the reliance on fossil fuels.
Okay, thanks very much, Shane, and thanks to Seán, Joseph, Paula and Keith as well for your attendance.